All right, let's take a look at solving a functional problem. This is problem number 4 in section 4E, page 146. So it reads about an Australian company producing and selling books. They give a cost function here. C of x is equal to 0.4x squared plus 1,500. Monthly income is given by this function, negative 0.6x squared plus 160x. Okay, we're going to go through these 4 problems now with it. It says show the company's monthly profit can be given by this quadratic equation. We'll do that first. It says use this now to find the profit when they produce and sell 6 books, when x is equal to 6. Comment on your answer. Then it says what profit does the company make when it produces and sells 40 books? And then what's the unit price? How much does each book sell for, assuming they all sell for the same amount? Finally, we're going to come back to this screen and look at the GDC in order to find out for which numbers of books, for which x's, P of x is equal to 0, the x-intercepts of these functions. All right, so now let's look at that in an easier to read area over here on the left-hand board. I've rewritten the cost and income functions. And it said in a little helpful aside on the right part of that page that profit is equal to income minus, let's just write I minus C, the income minus C. In fact, some people only consider income to be what you have after costs are taken out. But what we're going to do is we're going to take the income here and subtract the costs. That's how we find out what's left after you've paid all your bills. Okay. So what we're going to get if I subtract C from I is I have negative 0.6x squared. I'm going to subtract 0.4x squared. That's going to give me negative x squared. Okay, so I'm subtracting C from I. It would be easier if I wrote them in the other order. Let's try that. Let's write them in the other order. Let's start with I of x. I of x is negative 0.6x squared plus 160x. C of x, well, that's given by 0.4x squared plus 1,500. I'm going to write it a little bit off to the side so that we don't get our unlike terms mixed up. So now you see, if I take negative 0.6 and subtract 0.4, I'm going to get negative 1x squared. I have 160x, but I have no x's to take away from it. But then I do take away 1,500, and that is the quadratic that they asked me to show was the profit function. So there it is. That's the profit function quadratic equation. It's a quadratic formula, actually, or a quadratic function. For any x that I put in here, this will give me the profit. Okay, well that's the answer to part A. In part B, it says find the profit when you make and sell 6 books. What's P of 6? So I put 6 in there. I'm going to get negative 6 squared plus 160 times 6 minus 1,500. Okay, that's minus 36. 6 times 0, 6 times 36. 6 times 6 is 36, and then 960 minus 1,500. Well, what you can see here is that all these are, well, this one's positive, but we're going to end up with a negative number here. Negative 960 from 1,500 is 540, and then take 36 away from that. So that's 540 minus 36. Sorry. It's negative 540 minus 36, or negative 576. A negative amount. All right? So that shows that if they produce and sell 6 books, they do it at a loss. It costs them more to do that than they'll take in from the profit. So this is a loss. So this kind of profit function means you have startup costs, and until you produce and sell a certain amount, you're going to be operating at a loss. It's pretty realistic, actually. Now, I don't have room. I'm going to have to erase this for the next part. C asks a 2-part question. Let's leave the profit function there. But C then asks a 2-part question. So that last answer for B was negative, all right? So for C, part 1, it says, what do we have for 40 books? What's the profit for 40 books? Well, that's negative 40 squared plus 160 times 40 minus 1,500. All right, 40 squared is 1,600 This is what I have, let's see. Let's go ahead and use the calculator for this. We'll just figure out as the numbers get bigger, of course, it's going to be more difficult to do them by hand. So let's move over here, and we'll bring up the graphing calculator. All right. Doesn't have to be a graphing calculator for this. Any scientific calculator would do, or even one of the simple 4-function calculators would do. Let's get this out of the way. We'll clear out our calculator. All right, and then we'll just multiply out. We have, let's do the whole thing. We'll have negative 40 squared, okay? Then we're adding 160 times 40, plus 160 times 40. And then we finish off by subtracting 1,500, minus 1,500. All right, 3,300. Now, that might not be close enough to see. Oh, let's move over here. And let's move it a little closer here. Graphing calculator's not very big. All right, so that's just by calculating on the calculator what we had written out over here. Just putting the numbers in, and we end up with 3,300. All right, that's much better, and better than operating a loss. Now they've made $3,000. Well, 3,300. All of the units, all of the price, all the costs, they're all in Australian dollars. Okay. Now it also asks in part 2 what the unit cost was. So if this is the total amount they made, how much did they make per book? So per book, well, that's 3,300 divided by 40, okay? Well, let's go back to the calculator for that one. 3,300 divided by 40. Let's see if we can zoom in any further. No, that's about it. So we'll take 3,300, and if I just hit the dividing sign, it'll assume I'm going to divide the last answer by that, and divide by 40. 82.50, okay? That's the price. The profit made per book. $82 per book is the unit profit. Okay, let me get the pitch right here. $82.50 Australian dollars. Okay. All right, last one says, find out where the profit is 0. For what values of x is this 0? Now, you may have remembered from previous work with functions that this is a quadratic, so it's a parabola. It has a sort of bullet-shaped graph, and it opens, in this case, downward. So we have some positive values, we have some negative values. What you're going to see is that it comes up through the x-axis, hits a maximum, and goes down again. And so they want to know what are the 2 values at which you make no profit at all. We've already seen that for some values of books, namely the answer in part B, you're going to have a negative number. So all of that should be shown by the graph that we get. Let's look at the graphing calculator and make sure we can see what we're doing here. Let me move in a little bit more, and hopefully that'll be big enough for you to see. Now, we're going to graph the function. We're going to graph the function, so we're going to go to menu and go to the graphing menu, okay? We don't have any function put in there, so we're going to put in the profit function, which we've already found out from the first one was negative x squared. So it's the little x at the bottom, or the little negative at the bottom, not the big one. Then x squared. I can put the square inside or outside, I guess. I'll put it right now there and close up the parentheses. Negative x squared plus 160x. 160x. All right, and then minus 1,500. So let's just put it in. Minus 1,500. All right, we're done. All right, and I hit execute. Now you've got all these choices available to you. One of them is draw under F6. So we hit that, we're going to draw a graph. And like a lot of times, you don't see anything. So now what? Well, it's because my settings. So let's try something here. When you don't see anything, another thing you can try is trace. So if I hit Shift F1, then I can trace a little bit. If I move around with the arrow keys, you can see the x values and the y values. So this is showing that at an x value of 0.7, which is right about in there, my y value is negative 1,388. So no wonder I don't see it. It's way off of this scale. This window is determined by what I get here. So let's go Shift V window, and let's look what we've got. This is sort of a standard viewing window. from negative 6 to 6 and negative 3 to 3. That's my problem. I'm going to change this around. My x min, I found out already for 4 books I have negative profit. So I'm going to go ahead and put 0 in as my minimum value. I'm not going to sell any less than 0 books. I don't know what the max will be. I found out that if I was doing 40 books, I made a profit of 3,300. Maybe that was a clue. Let's say 80. We'll see where we are. For the scale, I want the scale. I'm hitting execute after each change. Let's put the scale at 20, and that way we'll get a tick mark every couple of things there. Don't worry about the dot. We'll hit execute again. And let's do down. I wanted to go back and do y min. Let's go back to the view window, and we'll go down. What's the y minimum? This is what I have to make very negative. Let's make it negative 4,000. 1, 2, 3. Negative 4,000. What about a maximum? Well, let's try maximum 4,000. We'll see where we get. This is just a trial and error process, and we'll see what we get. All right, so I think I'm all set. I'm going to leave this, well, let's leave that scale. We'll put that scale at 500, so that'll give us a tick mark every so often, and I think that should do it. Okay, let's try to draw it again now. Well, at least it's better. Now at least I have some part of the graph here. And as I mentioned, you might have known already that we're going to have a bullet-shaped graph opening downward, and we've got one of the 2 answers right now. I don't know exactly what it is, but there should be another one over here. So my x has to be bigger. My x max needs to be bigger. This is x max. It looks like I'm not even quite halfway there. So let's expand that. We'll expand y max too. So back to the viewing window. And let's go down to x max. Let's make the x max 200. All right, let's make sure we get it there. Execute. Go down. Let's do what about y max? Well, let's be generous there too, 8,000, all right? All right, that should do it. Let's see what we get. So this is a trial and error process. Looks like after a couple of iterations I managed to get it. I want these 2 x-intercepts. So my knowledge of functions tells me there's no more, but these 2 numbers are what I want. And to do that, I need the intercepts. I need to use the graphing calculator to find them. So I need the menu, and I need to calculate where the intercepts are. Okay, so I go back to the menu. Let's exit this. Okay, I want to calculate intercepts. So if I look down here, I don't have anything there that's going to help me. Let's exit again. Let's go up. All right, let's draw it. Now, I want to find G-solve, graphical solve. It's F5. I was looking for it on a menu. It's not on the menu. It's right here on the keyboard. So I shift and F5, now it gives me all these different choices. And the one I want, if you look through this list, you see y-intercept, but you don't see x-intercept. The root is the x-intercept. So I'm going to choose that. You can also find maxes and mins. We'll talk about that when we get to calculus. Right now, the root is where it's equal to 0. So I'm going to hit root, that's F1. And boom, right there, we get it. X is equal to 10. That's one of my 2 intercepts. Where's the other one? Well, I'm going to use the arrow key to move over. And zap, there it is, 150. So I have 2 values, one at 10 and one at 150. So the calculator really does all the work for you here. You have to know what that is. So those steps will be very important to remember. So my 2 answers for this one were 10 and 150. So let's go back. We'll look at the whiteboard and we'll put those in and then we'll be done. So for part D, I have P of 10 is equal to 0, and P of 150 is equal to 0. And the graphing calculator is what I use to find them. Okay, that wraps up this question, and we're going to go on and see more complicated functions and more graphing calculator issues with this in the future.